And hello again from WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal. I'm Josh Manning, Deputy Managing Editor over at the Western Journal. Joining me on my left is Joe Setyen, also Deputy Managing Editor for Story over at the Western Journal. And on my right, Andrew Shasha, reporter for the Western Journal. Thanks for being here today, guys. And thank you for joining us and watching. We've got 2 or 3 interesting stories to bring you today. The first one is, I think, the thing that's on at least probably about 75% of the country's mind, which is the weather.
And whether there will be weather.
And, well, there is weather. And contrary to what people have said about global warming for all of these years, it is positively frigid across an enormous amount of the country. I was looking at wind chill numbers on my phone before we got on the air, and we're seeing wind chills in the negatives in Texas. Negative 21, I think, is the lowest one. That's up toward the Oklahoma border. Negative 29, looks like around Oklahoma City.
You see, Josh, that's why they don't call it global warming anymore. We call it climate change now.
Exactly.
Because,
exactly. Change
kind
the
of
rhetoric.
the
Change the rhetoric. Exactly. So one of the things that's been very interesting to watch here is what's happened with energy. And we know that Joe Biden got into office being a fan, trying not to admit he was a fan, trying to temper and modulate and calibrate how he talked about the Green New Deal. Mm-hmm. But we know that that's near and dear to a lot of Democrats' hearts, and that means lots of wind turbines, and that means lots of solar panels, and that means not very much coal. As was it Kamala who said, you know, the guys who are in the coal mines, they can just they can do something else instead of working on the landmines.
Wasn't that Hillary?
Was it? No. Who talked about landmines? Somebody, I think it was Kamala who said, you know, they can do something else instead of working on landmines.
Yeah.
She meant coal mining.
It would be good to learn what the people doing the thing that you oppose do before speaking out against it.
Before you talk about it. Yeah. So a couple of types of green energy that we want to talk about here before we get going. The Western Journal is going to have a piece out on this a little bit later today, but I'm going to give you a preview. We pulled some of this information from other sources. Our friend Stephen Moore had some of this. Talking about wind turbines, the Center for the American Experiment, which is a Minnesota-based think tank, had this to say: wind turbines are shut down when temperatures are below negative 22 degrees Fahrenheit because it's too cold to operate them safely. This means it'll be too cold for the wind turbines built by the power companies to generate any electricity. So pray to heaven that if you're depending on a heater, it doesn't depend on a wind turbine. They go on to say wind turbines will actually, get this, consume electricity at those temperatures because the turbines use electric heaters to keep the oil in the housing from freezing. That would cause damage to the turbine if it happened. During the 2019 polar vortex, wind turbines were consuming 2 megawatts of electricity. That's right, folks. Wind turbines are a liability on the grid when power is needed most. So if you don't disconnect them, they actually draw from the power grid.
Not only are they, sapping the grid when they're the most necessary, they're useless when they would be the most when they should be the most profitable. When those cold fronts move in, I know, like we're living down here in Phoenix where we're headquartered, but back in New York and Boston, those cold fronts move in with absolutely obscene winds. That would be a great time to be having these turbines effective, but instead you're shutting them down.
Yeah.
I want to be careful with what I'm saying, right? Because I believe in climate change.
This is the part where he goes all liberal.
No, I believe in climate change. I'm a Christian. I believe we should be good stewards of the earth that God has given us.
Absolutely.
That being said, what I don't understand here is, one, does any serious person, even any serious leftist, really think that wind turbines are the energy of the future, right? Because it just, the amount of wind it takes to make energy is not really, gonna help long term on a large scale. And then you have this kind of thing where it's like, well, wind should be helping the wind turbines, but instead it just makes it completely inefficient so that it's not really helping anyone. So I don't understand really. There's ways to help the environment. There's ways to push for green energy. I have no problem with, the idea of saying we should try to be greener. But then you come up with solutions like these that just don't work. And I don't understand, why the left and people pushing this stuff think we can take them seriously.
Do you believe in man-made
climate
change?
Yeah. No, I do believe in man-made climate change. I think that obviously industrialization, and we don't have to get into this, right? Because it's beside the point.
If I believed in man-made climate change, I wouldn't want to get into it either.
Well, I do think the science, for the most part, has pointed to it. Is science perfect? Obviously not. They have been wrong about many, many things. I mean, science tells us that life, or scientists, the experts, would tell you that life does not begin at conception, which it does. So it's not like these people are infallible. But I take the evidence and I take the things that look, good for it and the things that don't look good for it. I think man-made climate change is probably a real thing, but there just has to be some sort of in between where you're not saying, well, we're going to get rid of all oil, all coal, all natural gas immediately, and we're going to completely change society, and we're going to reorder everything into the Marxist pipe dream. There has to be some in between, right?
Right. So I agree that there's enormous amounts of overreach. The piece on climate change that I just can't get, especially anthropogenic climate change, I just can't get back is the lack of data, the lack of direct data. And there's lots of inferential data. They say they pull ice core samples and those things. They don't really know that ice core sampling would be reliable back that far. And so we have 150 years. We have roughly 150 years worth of data.
They've been telling us,
and a pretty old Earth. So
I would have to agree. I think with both of you here on different points, I would agree with Joe that I don't think there's really any question that, we have impacted the environment. There's no question about it. I think that, like you're saying, Josh, before 150 years ago in the 1800s, we don't have all that much data. So I think it's very clear that we do see a bump on those graphs right when we start to industrialize. How much that actually impacts the globe is a huge question that we can't leave out of the discussion either. Is, if we're going to completely sack the American economy so that China and India can continue to destroy, the rest of the world's environment, and so that we can, save 0.01%, of a degree Celsius, we're talking about something very, very different. Yeah. And I think that's the problem, is where the left has this perfect world scenario in its mind and no understanding of what's actually going to be effective and what's going to be done. And I think you're absolutely right, Joe, that at the end of the day, I don't know how they can expect anyone to take them seriously, right down to, reduce, reuse, recycle has been a slogan on the left-wing environmentalist side for, decades. And we're now finding out that, reduction and reusability are really the two major prongs, despite the fact that we've relied on recycling, which is incredibly ineffective.
And they don't even pretend
to do all that much.
When you recycle your cans, there's a decent chance that they're not even doing anything different with them. No. They're just telling you to recycle because they know it makes you feel better.
Yes, 100%.
Comply.
And that's the thing. The last point I'll make on this specific issue is that there's a huge gap in between. Look, we have industrialized and we are probably making an effect on the climate. There is a difference between that and saying, well, the Earth is going to end in 50 years unless we turn everything around. The left wants you to believe that because that is the perfect way for them to implement what they want, which
power.
Is Marxism. Right. But there is an in-between, not to be a both sides person. There is an in-between where you can say, look, this is a problem. It's not, a problem that we have to figure out in the next 5 years.
It's not
this is something we should probably, deal with, that the free market can probably deal with.
I mean, I guess there's a question of how you would define a problem then. I'm not even positive I'd admit that it's a problem so much as if there is anthropogenic warming, then it's a condition, it's a circumstance. But life is filled with those, and we have to adjust.
And we will
compensate for those. It's not clear to me that that's a problem, though. So anyway, we will see. So that's turbines. Now let's
for bringing us off track a little bit there.
No. That's good. That's good discussion. Now let's turn to some info from Zero Hedge. Had some interesting stuff up. The natural gas spot price. This is the mid-continent price. Exploded from $3.46 1 week ago. Andrew, you and I were talking about this ahead of time. You thought GameStop was big? Listen to this.
I feel left out now.
The natural gas spot price exploded from $3.46 a week ago to $9 on Wednesday to $60.
Oh, 60 or 16?
60.
Okay.
$60.28 on Thursday, and an insane $377.13 on Friday. That is up 32,000%. One of the problems is that natural gas pipelines are freezing up. which is causing natural gas to flow very slowly and just sort of drizzle in. What is taking the place of natural gas? What's keeping everybody afloat? If you said coal, you are correct. Coal is what's doing it. Longtime energy expert Terry Jarrett. Jarrett served on the board of the National Utility Commissioners. He has written about this, and he says the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator, MISO, however you say it, which oversees power transmission in 15 states. MISO's reporting that coal is currently accounting for, let's see here, they had a snapshot on February 10th. Coal accounted for roughly 41,000 megawatts of electricity. Natural gas came in second at 22,000, almost half. Wind turbines delivered 3,200 megawatts. And solar, the thing that's going to save us, Solyndra, solar, 231 whole megawatts, folks. 231 megawatts coming in from solar power. So again, the question we were talking about, there is an answer to all of this that's staring us right in the face, but nobody on the left wants to talk about it. What's the answer?
It's nuclear.
Nuclear.
Thank you for not saying nuclear.
Anybody want to talk about that?
Yeah, nuclear power is safe for the most part. It is clean. We have advanced technologically to the point where we are able to use nuclear power to, use it as a regular power source. It's basically unlimited, right? Mm-hmm. And it just checks all the boxes, but the left is so concerned. And also nuclear power wouldn't let them implement the sort of hierarchy that they want.
That's a great point.
Because nuclear power wouldn't require a whole bunch of, changes.
Right. And nuclear, when the atom was finally splitting, nuclear was looked at as an option for all kinds of things, and the left associated that with the bomb, and they
and because the communists messed up their thing in Chernobyl.
Right. That is the most ironic part of this, is that the left is the patron saint of like environmentalism. They 100% kneecap the far left in the 1900s kneecapped the greatest energy solution in modern history. Yeah,
they even. I mean, you talk about Chernobyl, and you're completely right. Predating Chernobyl, though, you had propaganda pieces like the China Syndrome, which was a great movie with Jack Lemmon. It was also all about how dangerous nuclear power was, and so they've propagandized against this for decades and decades and decades, where it's like a boogeyman, and so, I mean, folks, just the thing to keep in mind here is, look, if they had their way, if AOC got her way, if the Green New Deal had gone into effect, pray to God we wouldn't have been very far down the path at this point. But if we had been, where in the world would we get the energy that's needed to keep everybody warm at this time? The other thing to consider is that globally, far more people die from cold than do from heat. Yeah. And so if keeping people warm in the winter means warming the planet a little bit, I am perfectly fine with it. But that is just me.
I saw a story, I think yesterday, in Tulsa, maybe Oklahoma. A man just died in the cold because there's a huge cold front here. It kills. It's not like no one really dies of the heat, but people do die of the cold. There's a lot of homeless people out there. Yeah. The left claims to care about the needy and the homeless and all this stuff, but they don't really want the solutions that are going to help them.
There are lots of heat deaths too, but cold deaths outclass them enormously. Bjorn Lomborg wrote about that in The Skeptical Environmentalist, talking about just how many, and I can't recall the numbers. It's been years since I've read the book, but the differential there is astounding. All right, we going to Andrew next?
Yeah.
Andrew.
Honestly, I'm so glad you brought this to the table today, Josh, because we're getting at the left's catastrophism when it comes to every major issue. They want, like you were saying, they want a catastrophe that they can use to collect more power. If they can get, the American people stirred up into a frenzy,
don't let a crisis go to waste.
Exactly. Never let a crisis go to waste. And so what I want to talk about today is we are still seeing troops in the capital. We still have a pseudo green zone like we had in Afghanistan and in Iraq, in Baghdad. We now have this major zone where National Guard troops, 25,000 were called in after the January 6th incursion. Again, we're not going to get off into the weeds here. It was bad. Moving on. Yeah. We don't need to play that game, the rhetorical game there. 25,000 National Guard troops from across the country were called in and deployed to the nation's capital to, check military checkpoints and to essentially just check the area through the inauguration. Well, now we're learning that they're going to have a tripwire force left in, that's the word that they use overseas. So we're going to have a tripwire force in Washington, D.C. of 5,000 National Guard troops that are going to be, supplementing the Capitol Police until as far as the fall. Not exactly sure on when that will end and if it will end. And so I guess what I wanted to get at here is, is there a deployment that the United States doesn't like indefinitely? No. Is there anything that we don't want to see? Meghan McCain, as much as I hate to give her credit, I absolutely hate to give the McCains any credit, wrote on February 14th on Twitter, now that impeachment is done, can D.C. stop having barbed wire fences and Humvees around the Capitol like this is a military base in Baghdad? And of course, the answer to that is no, because once the government has been given money, once it has been given a power, it never relinquishes that power. It is absolutely impossible, and I think there's no better, given that we're talking about the military, there's no better explanation than Afghanistan and Iraq, where we've had these troops there. Yeah. Well, until conditions improve, Lindsey Graham says, and this is, I want to, take it back to some figures on the right here rhetorically, that they are absolutely in favor of this kind of stuff. We've been there for 2 decades, and we're hearing, until conditions improve in Iraq and Afghanistan, we can't take this tripwire force of however many, several thousand out.
Yeah, so what does improvement in D.C. look like?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even domestically, I hate making 9/11 comparisons.
Yes.
I think you should not compare things. But I'm just making the analogy in that, look, the Capitol riot was a bad thing that happened. 9/11 was a bad thing that happened. Obviously, 9/11 was far worse. It's one of the darkest days in American history. But look what the government did after 9/11. It took our liberties, it passed the Patriot Act, you got the TSA, you got all of these things that provide security, theater, that don't really make us that much more safe. And at first we were like, whoa, this is different. And 20 years later, it's just an accepted part of life. If you give the government an inch, they will take a mile. Mm-hmm. If you give them an inch of, we're going to have troops deployed at the Capitol, for, however long we think, this is going to become, don't be surprised if this becomes a regular response, because we let it happen this time. And I'm not saying rise up or revolt or any of that stuff. I'm just saying we have to speak out against militarizing, the capital of the United States, just like we should have spoken out against the civil liberties violations that happened after 9/11. But if you give the government this power, and it seems the Washington establishment has said, we don't care if there are troops in the Capitol indefinitely, if you give them that power, they're not going to reel it back.
Well, if I had a 20% favorability rating, I'd probably want troops protecting me too, or whatever it is right now. I think it's actually inched up just a touch.
It's very low.
But yeah. Oh,
of course.
Yeah. I mean, what does it say when you need barbed wire and an entire military to protect you from the American voters?
And they don't. Here's the thing, but they don't need it. They don't need it.
They don't.
It's security theater.
It is definitely security. It is.
They haven't faced any threats.
I agree with you. I agree with you.
They faced a terrible day. The Capitol riot was a terrible, terrible day. And since then, there really have not been any threats.
But I don't know that they believe that. I don't know that they believe that they're safe. And that's an interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting thing too. I mean, what happens when you think that 74 million voters,
well, that's what happens when you try to get you a few extrements, a small number of extremists with very broad strokes. All Trump supporters are domestic terrorists. Yes. What? It's a very tricky game they play.
Yeah,
because they've taken this bad thing and they've used that to make everyone the villain. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people didn't catch it. We caught it because we're conservatives, libertarians, freedom-loving folks, but a lot of Americans didn't.
No.
Right. I think most of the people paying attention caught it.
Yes.
I think you folks
But they're focusing on people who don't pay attention.
Exactly. Folks in the middle who are not watching.
And that's the problem. I mean, before his death, I think I've said this on the show before his death, Andrew Breitbart said, the left has been looking for an excuse to paint conservatives as the next Timothy McVeigh for an eternity. I mean, now we have this where we're saying we're going to essentially, and name drop, when I spoke to Michael Flynn last week, he spoke
Did
about
you interview
how-
Michael Flynn?
Very nice. You know, I actually did interview Michael Flynn.
If I had $1 every time you mentioned that, or Andrew Breitbart.
And so when this security state that you guys are talking about that was established after 9/11 is now being turned on, the United States slowly but surely, we're talking about, on the day of the Capitol, cell phone data that can be now used to track and map what happened on the Capitol. So what I want to get at is what is next for the, it's not going to stop at troops in the Capitol. What is next when we're talking about a 9/11 commission to look into the Capitol, when we're talking about getting serious on white supremacist domestic terrorism, which is, we're dog whistling at,
Conservatives.
pulling conservatives
Yes.
we don't like and their opinions and using it to track them. And what's next?
Like most good sounding laws, that's something that you can say, oh, who could, everyone's against domestic terrorism. Yes, of course we should fight against that. But like most of those nice sounding laws, it will actually be used to attack people who are not breaking the law abiding Americans, and it'll be used to go after their civil liberties. Just like most terrorism laws, most of these things that happened after 9/11, the Patriot Act, all of this stuff. That's what's coming next, is they're going to keep using this stuff. They're going to keep inching their way, to make domestic terrorism laws and no-fly lists and all of this stuff. And eventually, if you, let's say, own a gun, or if you voted for someone, or if you posted on Facebook that you support Donald Trump, or if you support, a conservative or something like that, it's not going to happen overnight.
No,
it's gradual, it's slow, and they will creep up and take your liberties. They will do it. I'm not trying to be, I'm not trying to be an alarmist, but that's what they
history's
want
on
to
your
do.
side.
Yeah,
History's
that's
on your
what
side.
happens when you give the government an inch in history. They will eventually creep up and take everything.
So I think the gun thing that you mentioned, I would guess that's the next
one.
step. I mean, Biden's already telegraphed that that's something he's interested in, and an assault weapons ban. It's going to depend on how they It's going to depend on how they draw the definition of it.
Yes.
But that could potentially. I saw a post from a friend of mine who's a libertarian who tends to be a little bit detached from all of this stuff. And he posted a reference to that and said, look, this idiot, his word, this idiot's gonna cause a civil war. And I don't know about that, but if you, depending on how broadly you define assault weapon, you really
some
could
serious
end up with some very dangerous.
And we need
things
to pray
happening.
that there is no civil war.
Yes,
We do not want violence. We do not want a revolution. We want peace.
Yeah.
We would like freedom.
We need
Transition and
peace.
change.
We would like
all we
freedom.
want.
We would like the state
power
to
that
and
we've
freedom.
talked about.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so, Josh,
We
I
would
wanna
like the
ask-
Constitution to rule.
Yes.
And I want to ask one question to Josh before we move on to your segment, Joe. Josh, we've talked about this in the past. So this Big Brother state, we talked last week or maybe 2 weeks ago now about the left-wing attack on the Capitol that nobody knows about. This is your topic.
Yeah.
Does this Big Brother state ever get turned on groups like that?
Well, I guess it depends on who's using the state, right? The Soviet state was perfectly fine with violence committed on behalf of Marxist-Leninist ideology. So, I guess the best you could hope is that if something like that is set up, that conservatives eventually get control again and can use it for good. But the temptation there, of course, is to use it for good instead of disassembling it.
If I can
once you get power, you would disassemble something like
And look,
that.
the government has a long history of not just attacking right-wing groups. They went after Martin Luther King. The FBI did. They go after BLM, whether you want to say that's right or not. But they do. I mean,
government goes after
the
them?
FBI, yes, clearly goes after Black Lives Matter. We can look into. There's some sources on that I don't have at my fingertips, but they definitely do. I mean, they go after left wing groups as well. They go after groups that threaten the status quo, I think. And it's not.
That's probably true.
Yeah, they go after people who threaten the establishment because they want things to remain
Right.
the same.
Same.
Yeah. Anyway, are you ready for my segment?
Go right ahead,
All
sir.
right. Well, I've got an interesting one today because we are going to play a game. As you may or may not know, today is President's Day. And on President's Day, we play President's Trivia. So I have a few questions here. I'm going to ask.
This would be disastrous for me.
Go through. They're not hard questions, but they are a little
Well, that's
interesting.
gonna make it even worse.
You may have not heard some of these things before. I think this will be enlightening for our listeners and for y'all, and to our listeners and
I
to
don't
our
want any
viewers.
fraud claims. I'm closing the
I want to
laptop.
say, if you know the answer to a question, feel free to say it in the comment section. If you're watching,
Or
on-
just shout it out in
Yeah.
your room. We'll
or
hear
do
you.
it to that. We won't hear you, but it still counts. So my first question: this president was known for not liking Brussels sprouts. Is it A, George H.W. Bush, B, Martin Van Buren, C, Ronald Reagan, or D, Barack Obama?
Reagan.
What do you think, Josh? You can't
I'm going
speak out of turn.
I'm going to say Van Buren.
The correct answer is C, Ronald Reagan. 1-0 to Andrew.
Losing. All right.
Come on, you knew it had to be a Reagan one. We're WJ
One of
Live
those
after
fun-
all. Yeah. All right. Abraham Lincoln was the tallest president at 6'4". Who was the shortest? Was it
Martin Van Buren.
A, James Madison, B, Martin Van Buren, C, John Adams, or D, Andrew Johnson? Josh, I'll let you
I'm
ask.
going with Van Buren.
Going with Van
I'm
Buren?
not positive I'm right.
All right.
Feel
What
like
about
Adams
you,
would be
Andrew?
too.
I'll go with Madison.
You are correct. It is James Madison. Did you see my answers beforehand?
No, I did not.
James Madison was 5'4". Some sources say 5'3".
Wow.
Very short guy. Very
Short
good
in
president.
stature, but a tall pen.
Could talk about that at length, but I won't. I like James Madison a lot. Now, 3 presidents have died on the 4th of July.
Oh, jeez.
2 of them are pretty famous, Jefferson and Adams, who were, kind of opponents. They went back and forth in their day, and they died on the same day, on the 4th of July. Who's the third? Is it A, James Buchanan, B, John Quincy Adams, C, James K. Polk, or D, James Monroe? A lot of James.
JQA. Adams.
John Quincy Adams. What about you, Ann?
Monroe.
It is James Monroe. You are correct.
rigged.
That one was a guess.
clearly
the first 2 I
rigged.
knew.
And it
This
is
one
now
was a
3 to
guess.
nothing,
You did not know
Andrew.
the second
one.
one. You
Josh
did not know
will
the
need to
second
take
one.
the remaining 3 questions if
And
he
it ain't
wants
gonna happen.
any chance of winning. Now, this is an interesting one.
Okay.
The president who made the Star-Spangled Banner our national anthem, he signed into law the act that made that song, our official anthem. Was it A, Teddy Roosevelt? Was it B, Harry Truman? Was it C, Herbert Hoover? Or was it D, Dwight Eisenhower?
DR.
I'll say
Josh?
Hoover.
And Josh wins. It was Hoover.
Finally,
He
won.
signed it into law in 1931. It was maybe the only good thing that Herbert Hoover did. He was widely viewed in history as a bad president. Weird note is that many people think he was a bad president because he didn't do anything in the lead up to the Great Depression. So the left usually says, it was laissez-faire economics, and this is what happens. Herbert Hoover was a bad president because he did too much, and that is, many things led to the Great Depression. But he was by no means a free market economist. So, number 5, this president wanted and was, thanks to his wishes, he wanted his body when he died to be buried and wrapped in an American flag, and reportedly wanted his head to be resting on a copy of the U.S. Constitution. Was it A, Ronald Reagan, B, Andrew Johnson, C, John F. Kennedy, or D, Woodrow Wilson?
Oh, what?
Told you this was a tough one.
Can I get the options again?
Yeah, it's A, Ronald Reagan, B, Andrew Johnson, C, JFK, and D, Woodrow Wilson.
Woody Woo.
He's going to say Woodrow Wilson, okay?
JFK.
You're going to say JFK? You're both wrong.
Nice.
It's Andrew Johnson.
Really? That's an interesting play.
One of the
interesting play.
one of the presidents you don't think about.
The last ditch attempt to get to
I loved
for
America.
patriotism.
Please.
Yeah,
I loved America.
Failed as president, but thought,
I'm a big
I love
enough guy. The
Yeah.
Constitution that impeached me, I want my head.
He was the
resting
first
on
president to be
it.
impeached, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's an interesting piece of trivia. Not a very good president. Widely, hated. Led to a lot of bad things after Lincoln was shot.
Well,
But-
yeah, I mean the union's coming back. I don't know how
Yeah.
you can win that one.
Yeah, true. All right, this is my last question.
Wait, hold on. 6 questions. We could have had a tie.
Well, yeah, I didn't think of that, but we didn't because Josh is not very good at this.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Josh
time.
is not very good at this.
So,
I would like, when I die, I would like to be wrapped in Joe's shirt and have my head resting on those questions.
that would be awesome.
I would like
can
to take a
support that.
moment
I
to
can
shout
support
out
that.
the University of Massachusetts Lowell. I went to a state school in Massachusetts. Mr. Josh did go to Harvard.
Josh, where did you go to school?
Shows how much that was worth too.
All right, final question. This president eventually went blind in one eye due to a boxing injury suffered at the White House. Is it A, Lyndon Johnson,
TR.
B, Bill Clinton, C, Donald Trump, or D, Teddy Roosevelt?
I'm just going to say Donald Trump because it's funny, but it wasn't.
It was Teddy Roosevelt. Very nice job, Josh.
Every now and then. Thank you.
We're closing down on President's Day, but I do have to ask both of you a question. And you can answer it, I'm going to say, in 100 words or less. Who is the best president that America has had? I'll go with you first, Josh. Not to put you on the spot.
I don't know the answer to that question.
That's a very respectable answer.
I'm not positive. I'm
Maybe
not
your
sure
favorite
how you
president.
answer. I'm not sure how you answer.
Your favorite president might be better.
Oh gosh, probably Reagan with Trump as a close second.
Okay.
Not on any sort of. I like people who poke people I don't like in the eye, and that's what he did.
What about you? And you can't say Nixon.
I was about to say my favorite president is Richard Nixon, just because he is a very
Nixon.
complicated figure.
I do like Richard
very
Nixon.
interesting to me. But the best president of all time, it's a cliche answer, but I would have to go with George Washington. I mean, just getting up to Revolutionary War hero, and then getting up to the farewell address is
teach him how to say goodbye.
One of the greatest. We often hear people say that the measure of a great man is not what he does while in power, but how he gives up his power, or whether he gives up his power. We talked about that earlier in the episode. George Washington, a fantastic example. And then the fact that he was downright prophetic in that farewell address in saying that the two things that would tear apart the United States was endless involvement in foreign conflicts and factionalism in the United States. And he was absolutely right. So I think
250 years later.
George Washington.
Or however long it was.
But that's good. Yeah. Nixon did know how to bring the Viet Cong to their knees.
He did.
That fella knows how to bomb communists. And that, if you ask me, is one of the most important qualities to look for in a president. Willingness and ability to bomb Marxists. All right. Anybody got anything else for today?
I think we can
This is President's Day.
It is
Happy President's Day to you. Thank you for spending part of it with us on WJ Live. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to click the subscribe button. After you click subscribe, a little bell will come up, and you'll be able to click that, and that will make sure that you get to see when we go live.
Ding.
If you're just on westernjournal.com and you'd like to support us, we would appreciate that. We thank you for reading our articles. We thank you for spending time with us. If you would like to support us even more, you can go to westernjournal.com/join. westernjournal.com/join, or if you're just at the site in the upper right-hand corner, you can click subscribe. It's either subscribe or join. I can't remember which. And there will be several ways that you can support us there. Thank you for all that you do for us. We work very hard to keep you up to the date and to bring you truth and to bring you information from a conservative and a Christian perspective. We're looking forward to being with you the rest of this week. We are always here Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. We're going to see you tomorrow on WJ Live.
The Western Journal has rolled out a brand new subscription model designed specifically for readers like you, who want the unvarnished truth that the establishment media won't tell you. Our multi-tiered plans give you exactly what you want and help us fight fake news during this, the most important election of our lives. Become a subscriber to the Western Journal today and unlock exclusive features you won't find anywhere else. It's easy. Just follow the prompts in this video to join us in equipping readers